on Dear Africans. We dedicate our Thursdays to talking about some of the challenges that we experience as Africans. And one of these things is one of the demonstrations that took place, which was probably one of the most memorable ones. And, not necessarily in the best way, but March and March demonstrations, they took place and South Africa's, kind of highlighting our immigration issues. But I feel like deeper conversations need to be had about Africa's challenges, especially in our countries. So let's unpack this a little bit further. Joining us is Lucy Balimba, who is the founder and managing director of Entelo Africa. Thank you so much for joining us on The Upside, Lucy.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be having this really consequential conversation. So thanks.
Yeah, so, I saw a video, I think yesterday or the day before, when we saw Mozambicans or South Africans having a holiday in Mozambique and they were being chased away by the owner of that restaurant. And I feel like that kind of sparked a conversation about really the social consequences of some of Africa's challenges, right? Let's start with just the response about what has been happening regarding immigration. What are your thoughts?
Thank you. I believe that the immigration conversation is perhaps we are seeing it from a singular angle. And one of the fundamental truths that we all know and have accepted is that we definitely have a systems breakdown in our country. It's been healthy. It's been important for us to see people actively engaging in the conversation. But I certainly think that it is also quite important to then question the means in which we have been engaging in those structural conversations. So fundamentally, I believe that every society really, just like our country currently, does go through inflection points. It goes through moments that really allows us to look at public events as mirrors, right? So for me, the immigration conversation, it asks us to look at our fears. It reflects some of the assumptions that we've probably made, some of our prejudices. But I think, Poppy, fundamentally, it also reflects our very unfinished reckonings back to us. And one of the things that I mean when I say that we have probably been looking at this conversation from one angle is that the danger of looking at something in a mirror is that it eclipses the whole picture. And so we then begin to create conclusions from fragments, right? From an image, from a slogan, from a headline, from a moment. And so I want to go there in these conversations. One of the things that I like to do is telling stories. So I call myself a narrative builder. And for me, Ntsako and Poppy, this morning alone when we woke up, 9 million young people, so these are people between the ages of 18 and 35, woke up without employment. They woke up without any prospects of further education and training. And while that is a truth, it's a very distinct truth, there are so many other inflection points in that singular journey that if we interrogated it enough as a country, we would realize, for example, that youth unemployment is our problem as a country. And so I like to marry myself to a quote that has been syndicated over time. And it says, there's no such thing as a thriving business in an ailing society. I think we cannot refuse the role of honest juxtaposition when we are going through social crises. We can't be in fancy ivory towers and often just dissect things from a point of privilege. It's very important to get into the nexus of a social issue and find all the possible truths so that we can create fuller pictures and fuller truths. So I refuse to believe that this is an immigration issue alone. I think we are a society that is divided. I believe we're a society that is in pain. And I think that we are a society that is in desperate need to reinterpret itself.
So, Lucy, chat to us about what's been happening in the rest of the world when it comes to immigration, because they've also had inflection points with Brexit, with what's been happening in America, with Donald Trump. So we're not unique to the situation from a global perspective. It's just manifesting itself now in Africa and in South Africa in particular for the umpteenth time, but it's been happening the world over. What is unique about the South African story when it comes to this? And and also what are the similarities with the other nations that have also had to kind of, deal with this issue and problem?
That's so good because immigration is a global conversation. It's a conversation around socioeconomic legitimacy. It's a conversation around identity. It's a conversation around preservation. And I believe as a South African that we have not even began to allow ourselves to articulate very complex structural issues. I look at our psychology as a nation. We were so invested in the democracy project, which was so important for us as a nation, that when our leaders also assumed the position of leadership, I don't necessarily believe there was some level of deep healing that took place. So we immediately assumed leadership positions, and there was a cry out and a call and a desperate need from society to see change. And I think a lot of the times we're comfortable to make interpretations around fragments because they give us certainty. They create a particular emotional architecture because we can relate to the frustrations that we have. But I feel as a country that complexity demands patience. And I wonder if as a nation we have patiently really introspected our democratic narrative and what that means for what we gain and also what we lose as a nation. I'll make a very pivotal example. So in 2009, the NRF, National Research Foundation, supported me in commissioning research on Buipatong, another community, just next door to Sharpeville that went through a really, really antagonistic massacre. And I was studying the post-apartheid experiences of young people, so youth in that sense at the time. And it was so interesting to see how many of us create new truths out of borrowed revelation and borrowed memory. So a lot of the language and the reasoning of the young people of Buipatong that we interviewed at the time around why they're not employed, why they're not seeking alternative opportunities, etc., was cleaved onto a very deep sense of the massacre and that particular event. And it was so interesting to see how a lot of the massacre remained part of the community's consciousness. So it became part of their narrative. It became part of how they built truths around what was possible. And back to your question, I believe that we're unique in the fact that we have not given ourselves as a nation the ability to confront all our complexities in fullness, so that we can create new and deeper truths. So from a narrative building point of view, I often say that how we speak about a thing has a really big implication on the character and texture of the lived reality.
Lucy, I want us to continue with this conversation because, the way you're explaining it, I feel like there are different elements and questions that we want to get into. So can you hang 10 for us? We just have to get the sports and a business, a bulletin out of the way, but I promise we're going to continue the conversation just after these. It is 3:30 Central African time. Let's get into our sports news with Zycon.
Sports on Channel Africa.